All right, so let's talk about how to eliminate tension in your playing. So, we've all had those moments when in a performance we clam things, or and even in practice sessions we get really fatigued, we notice that our hands are hurting. All this stuff comes from tension, of course, right? And the best case scenario is that you can manage it, which is what a lot of professionals do. The worst case scenario is that it gives you TMJ or some other neurological condition that, it's going to hurt your health, right? So we got to get this tension thing under control. So the number one thing that we got to do in order to reduce and eliminate tension is to master the mind-body feedback loop. Essentially what's happening here is that we have two types of tension. We have mental tension and we have physical tension. Mental tension being the anxiety and stress that we experience regarding a performance, or if we have to play in front of someone else, right? And the physical tension being the actual tightness and the pain that we feel in our muscles, in our joints, tendons, etc. And so what happens is there's actually a feedback loop between our mind and our body. This is that when we tighten up our body, we also get tight in our mind. We experience more anxiety, we get more stressed out. And when we get more anxious in our mind and we get more stressed out, we get more tight and more closed off in our body. And so as you would imagine, this creates a vicious cycle where we just spiral downwards into a world of chaos and despair. And so the trick here is to master this mind-body feedback loop so that we can instead create a virtuous cycle. So the first thing that we have to do is we always have to be releasing. And what this really means is that while we're practicing, we have to be reversing out all of our physically tense tendencies. So the number one tendency that I see in students that they get really tense is they're biting with their embouchure. And so when we practice our long tones, when we practice our pieces, we really have to make sure that we aren't biting. Another one is that we squeeze the clarinet way too hard, right? A good indication that you're squeezing too hard is if you press down and you see that the tips of your fingers are turning white. So if the tips of your fingers are turning white, you're definitely pressing too hard. And so it's really important to just find what's the least amount of tension that we can use on the instrument in order to seal it so we don't squeak and we play the right note. An example of how you could do all of this sort of in one is by just practicing super slow, what I call Zen mode, which is just basically where you take a piece and you go extremely slowly through it. So if I take Peter and the Wolf, what I started off with, that tricky, ascending run, right? The way that I practiced it beforehand to prepare for the video is that I just took it super slowly and I made sure that the air is passing. I made sure that my embouchure is just the right tension. I made sure that my fingers are just the right tension. And I made sure to constantly reverse out. When I was biting too much, I said, open, open. When I was closing off my oral cavity, I said, ooh, go more, ooh, right? When I was pressing too hard, I said, relax, relax, release it, right? And so an example of that would be like this. Right? And when you're going this slow, you can tell when you stop passing the air, right? There's also a level of awareness that's involved in finding your own little mistakes when you're creating too much tension. The three places, obviously, where we're going to be reversing out the most is going to be the fingers, the embouchure, and the air. This is number one. Now, number two is to prioritize posture. Now, there's three different points of posture. There's the lower back, there's the shoulders, chest, and there's the neck, right? Anytime that we collapse one of these 3 points of posture, we create more tension. And actually what we do is we signal to our brain that we need to go into fight or flight mode. Because think about it, right? If your neck is broad, you're signaling to your body that you're safe, right? But when you're trying to hide your neck, right, it's like, oh, something's going to come and attack you, right? So you have to tell yourself, no, right? Broaden the neck, broaden the shoulders, right? This increases the comfort and the confidence that we feel. And this is the foundation of really, actually in the moment of performance, controlling and creating this virtuous cycle. Number three is more of the mental side, and it's more of a mental frame that we can use when we're performing in front of an audience. And it's just that we want to try to constantly communicate, right? So most often when we're performing, we feel that right there and we have all these eyes staring at us, right? And we're getting all nervous and we're, oh, I know, and I got to be correct and everything. Well, I want you to change the paradigm and think of that you're like you are the one that's leading the audience. You're communicating with the audience. You have to bring all of the notes out to them. And you really have to make music with them, right? You have to include them in the music making. And it also makes it, I think, a lot more exciting, a lot more fun for the audience when a performer does this versus when they're just up there worrying about themselves and just trying to play all the notes, right? We got to communicate. We have to bring the audience. We have to include them. Number 4 would just be to full send that shit, like 100% conviction. I see a lot of people go up and they try to play it safe, right? And while this might be a good idea if you're trying to pass the first round of an audition, when it actually comes down to performing and making people enjoy what you're doing, if you're holding back, you're not giving 100%, it's not going to be very exciting. And what's it going to do, right? You're not flowing, you're holding stuff inside. And when you're holding stuff inside, you develop, there's more tension, right? Mental tension, which then manifests into physical tension, just full send it. Don't care. This is not the moment to be worrying. Which then brings us into number 5, which is that you have to detach yourself from the outcome. So you have to first manage what you can control. You forget about the stuff that you can't control, but you don't worry about either of them. And I'm sure that we've all experienced moments when we are completely underprepared, but we walk into, performance and it turns out great. But we've also run into some times where we're extremely prepared and somehow we still clam it. And so do everything that you can, but realize that, if you have a bad read or if it's just a bad day, then, stuff is just gonna happen, right? And you can't really control it. You can only control the inputs. You can only control what you put in. You can't really control what you get out. But with enough inputs, you heighten the probability of a good outcome, right? This is super important to understand. And it's really important to convince yourself, detach yourself from the outcome. Don't care what happens, full send that shit, communicate with the audience, prioritize your posture. And when you're preparing, always be releasing and reversing out your tension.